The Greyhound PD-4501 Scenicruiser. It was an icon of the American road in the mid-20th century. But as no bus lasts forever, one of its planned replacements turned out to be too big, even for the USA. And this new Intercity bus became one of Greyhound's most mysterious vehicles ever. This is the story of the Greyhound MC6 Supercruiser, the bus that even America couldn't handle. Hi, this is Jeffrey. Now, most bus fans are probably familiar with the Greyhound PD-4501, also known as the Scenicruiser. And even if you're not a bus fan, you probably have seen pictures of it at one time or another. An icon of the American road in the 1950s and 1960s, Greyhound started to plan for its replacement in the mid-1960s. They developed two buses at the same time, the MC7, which became very mainstream, and the MC6, which was a very mysterious bus, and not too many of them were produced. It turned out to be a bus that was too big and too powerful, even for the American road. It's a really interesting story, so let's get started in learning about the MC6 of Greyhound lines. Probably the most famous Greyhound bus of all time was the PD-4501 Scenicruiser. Easily identifiable by its two-level design, it had become an American transportation icon, with 1,001 of them built. But by the mid-1960s, Greyhound's Scenicruisers were getting tired. They had been in frontline service for a good decade or so and needed to be replaced. Greyhound purchased Motorcoach Industries, generally known as MCI, in 1959 to serve as its sole source bus manufacturer. This was largely because of its disappointment with the 4501, which had initial powertrain reliability problems and later developed cracked frames. MCI, on the other hand, already had their successful MC5, a 35-foot coach introduced in 1964 as a replacement for the older GM PD-4104 and 4106 models. But Greyhound needed a larger high-floor vehicle. So, to meet this requirement, MCI developed two new buses at the same time. One of the two, the MC7, would become quite successful, with 2,550 of them built. But the other coach would be far more unique, rare, and even mysterious. And so, what would this other new MCI Greyhound bus introduced in 1967 be? It was the MC6 Supercruiser. A total of 102 MC6 coaches would be built, but the model was discontinued in 1969, less than 2 years after its introduction. The first two were prototypes and had their non-driving tag axle covered in a skirting of its bodywork. And one of these two prototypes had a Mercedes 8-cylinder diesel, while the search continued for a right-sized Detroit diesel engine for this bigger bus. These two were known as the MC6. But it was really exceptional in the fact that it was the first 102-inch wide, 40-foot long Intercity coach. At the time, Canada and several US states on both coasts had increased their interstate highway maximum vehicle width dimensions from 96 to 102 inches. Greyhound had believed, incorrectly, that other states would follow this lead and adopt these wider limits. But many states kept their 96-inch rule until the federal government enacted the Surface Transportation Highway Act in 1982, which standardized the 102-inch width on the entire national highway system. As such, these buses were confined to routes in Canada and along the 2 U.S. coasts. In 1968, the 100 production MC6s started to roll off the assembly line. 85 of them would live out their life in the US, while 15 were confined to Canadian routes only. Now, let's take a look at some of the basic specifications of the Greyhound MC6. Number 1, length is 39 feet 11 and a half inches. Number 2, width is 102 inches. Number 3, height is 12 feet. Number 4, weight is about 35,000 pounds. Number 5, passenger capacity is 43 and had a restroom. Number 6, engine is the Detroit Diesel 12V71 with 4-speed mechanical transmission, but the 85 US-based buses were repowered with a turbocharged 8V71 with 4-speed Allison automatic transmission. And finally, number 7, top speed is 80 miles per hour, as that was its reported speedometer maximum limit. Throughout their lives in the US, the MC6s were confined not only to specific routes, but to a limited number of garages and depots as well. Richard O'Leary, a senior scheduler at Greyhound in the 1960s and 70s, explains.
In the eastern U.S., among the lines they operated on were the New York City to Chicago route, and one of the most unusual assignments for the MC6s was in the San Francisco Bay Area, where Greyhound was permitted to operate 102-inch wide buses on their suburban routes within a 50-mile radius of San Francisco. 15 were assigned to this service, normally operated by a fleet of GM Transit buses. Being the tallest coaches operated in the U.S. at the time, only a few depots could accommodate them.
Its exterior was characterized by its modestly double-stepped roofline, but its interior had a sloping floor with no steps, except for a step-up at the last row of seats. Seats at the second set of windows were on a platform, making them higher than the seats at the front half of the bus. And walls were adorned with illustrations of forests and nature, almost like a Bob Ross painting. The MC6 was one of few coaches to use the 12V71 engine that roared out over 400 horsepower and 1,200 foot-pounds of torque, and was nicknamed the Buzzin' Dozen. The 85 US-based MC6s were subsequently re-engined with the 8V71T and Allison automatics in 1977. The American MC6s were retired in 1980 and sold off. But the MC6 was the largest non-articulated and most powerful intercity bus on the road until the introduction of the MCI 102A3 and Eagle Model 15 with the 8V92TA engine in 1985. The MC6 was truly the bus that was too big and powerful even for America. Well, for a time, at least. And so there it is, the story of the Greyhound MC6 Supercruiser, one of the most unusual Greyhound buses ever built. Now, have you ever ridden on an MC6, or have you driven one, or have you worked on one in some way? That would be really interesting to hear. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the Greyhound MC6 Supercruiser, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.